a very special language programme. So thank you so much for joining us today. Just to make you aware, today's webinar will be recorded. So you'll be able to find the webinar uploaded to our ATtherapy YouTube page if you'd like to go back and have a look at this again, or if you want to share this with somebody who might find it useful. There's lots of really interesting ones on there. So today's topic is Makaton, a very special language programme. There's lots of different language programmes out there, but hopefully by the end of this session today, you'll understand why we feel Makaton is truly special in terms of its usability with such a broad range of clients, really. So a bit about me. My name is Katie Solaru, and I'm a highly specialist speech and language therapist working for ATtherapy. I'm a new member of the team. I started with ATtherapy in January this year, and it's my first webinar today, which I'm really looking forward to. Personally, before joining ATtherapy, I've been following these webinars for a while and I've always felt like I've learned something new. So my specialisms are working with early intervention and with children with complex communication needs. In my previous role, I'd used lots of kind of no-tech AAC, but since joining AT, I've loved learning about high-tech AAC. So along with me today, we have Annabel, who's a specialist speech and language therapist, and we also have Sally, who is an education and therapy assistant, and I'll let you tell them a little bit more about themselves in a minute. Something that we've all got in common though is that all three of us are Makaton tutors. So this means that we've got a license to run the official Makaton training courses. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll leave some time for comments, questions and discussions at the end. So just on to our next slide. So I've already told you a little bit about myself, but I'm a speech and language therapist who loves play-based therapy and making therapy and learning of language fun through play. I've been a registered Makaton tutor since 2021. And should we go to Annabel next?
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name's Annabel. I'm also a speech and language therapist. My background is in special education. I've worked quite extensively in special education schools and colleges, and I'm currently specialising in AAC and everything that brings with it. I became a registered Makaton tutor in 2019, so I've been doing it for about 4 years now. And I don't know if anybody else got into a lot of singing and signing over lockdown. I certainly did. My favourite song to sign along to is Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. And in my spare time, I like to keep fit and I love sending people pictures of my cat.
Hi everyone, I'm Sally and I'm an education and therapy assistant with a background of teaching at a special further education college with specialist areas of performing arts, skills for life and communication. I became a registered Makaton tutor back in 2010 and I'm the co-founder and managing director of Sign Out Loud. And in my spare time, I love to perform on stage and do amateur dramatics.
Fabulous, thanks Sally and Annabel. So the aims of today and what we'd like to cover, a wide area of topics really, as essentially today we'd like to try and demonstrate to you how Makaton's such a fantastic approach for supporting language development and communication skills with a really broad kind of spectrum and range of clients in terms of different ages and different needs really. And it's great for us to have an opportunity to raise the profile of Makaton, which is an incredible charity. So Sally's going to give you a little bit more background about what Makaton is in just a moment. For anybody who might be new to Makaton, or perhaps some of you are already using Makaton a little bit, but you may not have been on any formal training. So Sally can tell you a little bit about Makaton, and she's also going to show you 5 signs so you can have a practice of using Makaton. I'm going to be talking about my experiences of using Makaton with really, really young clients, so with babies and toddlers up to primary age children, and what that might look like and some ideas of how to get started. And then Annabel is going to talk about her experiences of using Makaton in special needs college. So she'll be touching on how do you know when it's appropriate to use Makaton, as well as covering how it can be really helpful to support around safeguarding young people. Sally is going to talk about how she's used Makaton with adults. Sally runs an amazing choir called Sign Out Loud with her partner. She's been using Makaton for many, many years alongside music. So personally, I'm really looking forward to hearing about her experiences with Makaton. So even though we're all tutors, we're all using Makaton therapeutically in very different ways. And yeah, to finish, Annabel will run through some top tips for using Makaton, and she will summarise why we use keyword signing and give you some ideas of how to embed its use into everyday life. So over to Sally.
Okay, so what is Makaton? So Makaton is a unique language program, which is a multimodal approach for teaching communication, language and literacy skills. When asked to describe what Makaton is, it's functional, it conveys meaning, is meaningful, and acts as a visual clue to support memory and to aid understanding of the spoken word. The name Makaton comes from where our founder, Margaret Walker, did a study at a long-stay hospital for a group of adults with severe learning difficulties and hearing loss, alongside two other members of staff there, Catherine Johnston and Tony Cornforth. Makaton, Ma for Margaret, Ka for Catherine, and Ton for Tony. The study identified a small functional vocabulary of everyday needs, and these help to form the basis and structure of the core vocabulary. Makaton is used all over the world and is based on the natural sign language used in that country. Therefore, in this country, we use British Sign Language. That's what it's based on. But just like our accents, BSL can slightly differ. So Makaton has been standardized throughout the UK to avoid confusion for Makaton users and their interactive partners or carers. Makaton is a multimodal approach where we use the speech with signs alongside symbols and alongside speech, an example of which I've drawn in Makaton symbol format here. A question that as a tutor we're often asked is, what is more important, the iconicity or the motivation? Should I only teach my child the signs and symbols which look like the thing that we're talking about? So there's no clear answer to this. In general, yes, the concepts that look like the thing you're talking about, they are easier to learn or recall, but there is a very good reason why children learn biscuit so easily. And the reason why it's the 6th sign in stage 1 of the core vocabulary. And that's because the reward and the motivation is there. So Annabel.
Okay, so we are going to run through 5 really important signs for you today. And just before we do, just some things to remember when you're using Makaton signing. When you're signing, you always speak as you sign. So always speaking and signing at the same time. Remember to be consistent. And what I mean by this is that when learning Makaton, we identify our dominant hand. So if you're right-handed like I am, you'll do all the signs with this hand as your dominant hand. And I'll explain that as we do some of the signs as well. And remember to be expressive, put some fun behind it, use your facial expressions, use your tone of voice to give those extra clues about what you're communicating. So if we go on to the next slide, I will invite you, if you would like to turn on your cameras so that we can all sign together. If not, just make sure you can see all of us and we'll go through the 5 signs on the screen. So we're going to do hello, goodbye, food, drink and toilet. So just remembering to speak and think about your facial expression as you're doing them. Okay, so as I said before, I am right hand dominant. This is my dominant hand. So if the sign requires one hand, this is the one I'm going to use. So our first sign is hello. So we're starting just slightly in and coming out. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, can I just check Annabel? Can everybody see Annabel on the screen?
Yeah.
Can everybody see Annabel?
Yes, see
Yeah.
Annabel.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's do that one again. So hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, and our next one is goodbye. So again, I'm using my dominant hand and it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. The next sign, a very important sign for lots of us, is food. So you are going to make a sort of scrunched fist with your fingers, and then it's one tap on the side of your mouth. So again, it's your dominant side and the dominant side of your mouth. So food.
Food.
Just one tap, food. If you do two taps, it turns into to eat. Just a little extra sign there. Food.
Food.
The next sign we've got for you is drink. So you are going to make the shape of a cup with your hand. As you can see, I've got my fingers quite tightly together, like I'm holding a cup. And then you're going to put it in front of your face and just tip it, drink.
Drink.
And again, just making sure that you're keeping your head still, because we're talking about a drink, not to drink. So it's the noun rather than the verb.
Drink.
Drink. And then the final one we've got for you is toilet. So there are two signs for toilet that you can use. The first one, so I'm going to take my dominant hand and I'm going to go to my non-dominant side, and with my middle finger, I'm just going to lightly brush on my shoulder. Toilet. Toilet. And then the other sign is just isolating this middle finger. And again, just lightly rubbing it on your shoulder, toilet. So either of those are fine. This is the newer sign for toilet, but some people who've been using Makaton for longer might know this one a little bit better. So toilet.
Toilet.
There you go.
Great, thanks so much for that, Annabel. Okay, on to the next slide. Thank you. So I'd like to talk to you about using Makaton with babies, toddlers and primary school age children. So in my previous role before joining ATtherapy, I worked in the NHS for coming up to 11 years now. Had a couple of different roles while I was there. My first role was working in primary schools, special schools and resource schools. So resource schools are mainstream schools that have got an additional resource. So it may be they have a class attached with a smaller class size and teachers that have got specialist training. So I worked in primary schools, and then I also worked in a child development unit in a hospital. So that was working with preschool children aged 0 to 5 years old. And I used Makaton with all of these different age groups. And working with the under 5s, I often had the pleasure of being the first person to share Makaton with a parent or with a baby or toddler. So I'll tell you a little bit about babies and toddlers, using Makaton with babies and toddlers first. So working in the child development unit, children sometimes became known to us before birth if they had a known diagnosis of, say, Down syndrome, for example, or it may be just after birth, things like children with cerebral palsy or with genetic syndromes, or, children with a developmental delay of an unknown cause, really. So some children, such as those with Down syndrome, we have pathways that we followed in the NHS, which is the kind of the therapy interventions that we would offer to those children. So for children with Down syndrome, we had written into that pathway that they would meet with a speech and language therapist, at 6 months old, really, for that initial meeting. So I think often parents are probably wondering why they've been sent a speech and language therapy appointment for their 6-month-old baby who's not even babbling yet. But it was a really great opportunity to introduce the family to Makaton, to explain kind of a little bit about what it is and how it can be really helpful for supporting that child's communications. Because although the child, we're not expecting them to copy a sign at 6 months old, they can start using signing with their child to support with understanding of language and learning of language. So a lot of mainstream kind of baby groups are now using Makaton or other signing systems. So I know that Baby Bloom is one where a colleague of mine in my old job, Jen, she was a Makaton tutor. She's working towards a Makaton friendly accreditation with them by getting all of the trainers signed up in using Makaton, which is just fantastic. I know that Baby Sensory, they also use Makaton, I think mixed with another signing system as well. So Makaton also offer a training course, which is called Makaton Signing for Babies and Families. So it's 6 sessions, and the sessions are play-based, and you take the baby along with you. So it's for parents and babies. It's a little bit different to the other Makaton courses that run because the baby is there and because it's all through play and games and songs. And over those 6 sessions, you'd learn 100 signs and symbols. And if you're interested in that course, you can have a look on makaton.org and have a look and see if there's anybody in your area running courses, or I know it's becoming more and more available online as well over Zoom. So a little bit about how I used Makaton with babies and with toddlers in my role. So within early intervention, for me, kind of the big focus often to begin with was trying to get the child to produce their first sign or first word, and really trying to get them going with that communication and with that language. So it's very special to share that with a family. You know, if a child has their first sign within a therapy session or within a group session, it was always really lovely. And I'd say that the top 3 signs that I had the most success with in therapy sessions were your signs for ready, steady, go, for more, and for help. And I think that's because each of these words are highly motivating, because the child is getting something that they need or want. So I've put some ideas there of different things that I might use within my sessions to try and create an opportunity for the children to use these signs. So anything that the child needs you to do for them is great for your ready, steady, go game. So, you know, with a 6-month-old baby, blowing bubbles, blowing up a balloon and then letting it fly around the room. I've got the pop-up frog there, which when you lift the lid up, the frog pops out and squeaks. Click-clack tracks with the cars. We give the build up of the ready, steady, go, model those signs. Let's have the parents sat behind the baby, supporting them with hand under hand signing to make those signs, and then leaving that big pause, the expectant look, and then waiting for the go. So the child signing the go was often one of their first words or signs, which was always lovely. More as well, you can build into any of those games for them to request more of the activity once you've done it the first time. Also using snacks is a great way to really practice the more sign, because it's something that a parent can easily do throughout the day. It's not a special play activity. The only tweak that I suggested making was, instead of giving their child, you know, the bowl of crisps, keep hold of it and then give them the crisps one at a time. So then it's creating lots of opportunities for the child to practice the more sign. The last 2 pictures, there's a sippy cup there and a box with like a clippy lid. This is to encourage help. So often within speech and language therapy, you might hear it being called sabotage, where you kind of sabotage something within an interaction to create an opportunity or a moment for a child to communicate. I think using the word sabotage with babies sounds a little bit mean. So I used to say creating like communication challenges. So it's simply like making a mistake or forgetting to do something to create an opportunity for the child to ask for help. So might give them their, you know, their cup without anything in it, or might put their snack into a box that's difficult to open. Things like, you know, if they're wanting to go out of the room, not automatically open the door for them, but helping them with that hand under hand signing of help and then opening the door. So just kind of trying to build these things into the day. So some of the groups that I ran, often I'd run them with 3 children per group, and here I've just kind of got like a little bit of a session plan, some examples of some things that I used to put, or I used to kind of play with the children with those groups. So for small babies, they will be sat on the floor with parents sat behind them. And then for older children, kind of 18 months, 2 years and upwards, We'd do bench seating. We'd often have input from the OT or the physio as to what was appropriate seating for them so that they felt supported. But we'd always have the parent behind them so that the parent can support with that hand-under-hand signing. We're using kind of errorless learning or fault-free learning. So the parents, in a way, doing the signing for the child to begin with, and then reducing that support over time. I think when a lot of people introduce sign with a child, they might find that the child's not copying the signs. They're kind of looking at the parent expectantly, you know, especially with things like a ready, steady, go. I remember that you put that pause in and the child's looking at you, waiting for you to sign go. So using the hands over hand signing is a really great way for them to experience that success of communication themselves, and to help them realise that, oh, I can do this. I can be the one to make things happen. So I'll just run through some of the kind of activities that I used to do in those groups and what kind of Makaton signs we'd use. So we'd always start off with a hello song, which was great for teaching greetings, learning how to sign their name, which would often just be signing the first initial of their name, and then socially getting them to say and sign hello to each other. We'd always kind of do a little bit of a check-in to see how they're feeling, to have the Makaton symbols for happy, sad, tired, excited. I'd show them the signs and ask how they were feeling. I'd always kind of over-egg my facial expressions, you know, when signing. So sad was really, really sad. And this often led to the children always saying they felt sad because they wanted me to show them that sign because they found it really funny. And then we'd often do like a warm-up game. So the burst and pause games that I mentioned before, so the ready, steady, go type games. They were great for your ready, steady, go, for your more, but also for requesting, so teaching them the vocabulary, the signs to ask for things that they want. And for some children, beginning to join two signs together, so things like more balls or more balloon or I want the balloon, just signing the keywords to begin with. So what's in the bag was one that we often had in there. Young children seem to love this and always want to know what's in the bag. We'd often do a different topic each term, so it could be animals or transport, and it's always, you know, really helpful to teach Makaton in little categories like that with young children. And then from that game it creates opportunities for lots of commenting, so to support the children to tell us if they like that animal or if they don't like that animal. We could talk about the colour and the size and show all of those Makaton signs as well. To often do some songs or nursery rhymes, encouraging the children to make a choice for the one that they want, but it just gives parents something nice to go home and practice with their child, those nursery rhymes, and often books as well, to introduce books and just encourage that keyword signing of, you know, just signing one thing on a page of a children's picture book at a time. So supporting the child to give directions. So, you know, within these sessions, we're trying to work on lots of different communicative functions. So not just requesting, but yeah, giving directions, commenting. So you could use like musical instruments for up and down, stop and go, things like that. We'd often do a treasure hunt, so hiding things around the room, which was good for children that need that active element within the session. And just because of the age of them anyway, sessions were often 30 minutes to 45 minutes long, and the, you know, attention was amazing. I think because we did lots of little activities, often engagement was really great right through to the end, but doing a treasure hunt was a great way to get them up and moving if they needed that. And then I've got a picture of the monster boxes there. So often, yeah, finding an item and feeding it to the monster box was a great motivator for these children. Thank you. So the big question that would often come up when introducing sign-in with a baby or toddler was the concern about whether it would stop them from talking. You know, if a child's signing, then are they going to develop speech, or is it going to slow down the speech? So if you to go on the Makaton website, makaton.org, they've got loads of research on there. You can create a free account. There's lots of information on there and lots of research papers, and some that they've made really accessible and easy to read. But generally, research has shown that signs and symbols actively encourage the development of speech and language skills. You know, when we're signing, we always speak at the same time, so we're always linking that sign or that symbol that we use into the spoken word. And in fact, there's been lots of research to suggest that it also develops lots of other skills too. And just briefly, the baby signing came about because of some research that was done in the 1990s by Garcia. And they found that children who were born to deaf parents, so because both parents were deaf, their main language, their only language was American Sign Language, as it was over in the States. And when they had children who could hear, they found that those children who had learned sign language before spoken language, because they're not hearing spoken language at home, it actually meant that they were developing language a little bit earlier, which was, yeah, really positive. And they found that they had better vocabularies as well when compared to children from non-signing families. Makaton have also done some research, some of their own research as well, about Makaton signing with babies. So if you come along on one of the courses, you'll learn lots more about the research. And as I said, there's lots online as well on the website that you can have a look at. Okay, so just a little bit about using Makaton with primary school children. So again, Makaton is really special and really fantastic because you can use Makaton with a range of ages, which we're discussing, but also with children with a range of language capabilities. So, you know, I'm using Makaton with children that are pre-verbal and children that are a little bit verbal and children that are very verbal. So just some examples of different ways in which you might be able to build Makaton into, if you're a speech and language therapist or a teacher, into using Makaton within some of the things that you might be doing with a child primary school age. So we might be beginning to focus more on joining signs together. Children might already be doing this at preschool level, but you know, at school age, definitely this may be a big focus. So again, things like using symbol boards to build signing sentences such as I like, I don't like, or I want, I don't want, commenting, requesting. And we may begin to use signing with programs such as Colourful Semantics. So this is a language program to support sentence building where each part of a sentence has got a different colour, and you can also introduce signs to go along with each of those. So next on there, another way I'd introduce signing is to support the class around the class topic of that term or of that week. So at the moment, I'm supporting a child who is an amazing reader. She reads really, really well, but then when you ask her about the story, she's struggled to comprehend or grasp the story. So I'm doing some pre-teaching with her around the book that they're going to be doing in class, so that by the time that they come to do it as a class topic, she'll already know some of the harder words. So it's a Scarecrow's Wedding. She'll already know and understand things like confetti, cigar, marriage and wedding, and I'll have showed her the Makaton signs for those as well. Which is great because she'll feel confident going into that then when it becomes a whole class topic. So another way you can use Makaton is to support with transitions. So signing now and next, or first and then. You can use the signs for that, or you can use the symbols. And then next, around narrative programs. So if you've not heard of narrative therapy, it's a great way to support children to be able to tell stories about themselves, about others. And the way in which we do that is we introduce the concepts of who, where, when, what happened, teaching vocabulary around those areas, and then giving a child a structure to be able to talk about themselves or about others. So a good example of this is working in a special school, a child that had been scratched during break time by another child, and although they had language, they really struggled to be able to give the narrative of what had happened. So she'd been doing narrative therapy, and the teacher had the cue cards on a lanyard around her neck. So there's a symbol for the who, the where, the when, what happened, and also the signs as well. So the teacher was able to support the child to be able to give that information by breaking it down, showing her the visuals and the signs. Well, who was there? Where were you? You know, what happened? And by breaking it down, the child was able to explain what happened. Whereas if she tried to tell the whole story without any support, it would have been quite tricky for her. So you can bring your Makaton into emotional literacy works. I've already spoke about using it with really young children, but you might then begin to use it with other kind of schemes, such as like zones of regulation. So within your blue zone, you can model your signs for things like tired boards, green zone, things like calm, ready to work. yellow zone, you might be teaching Makaton signs around excited, anxious, red, you've got angry, things like that. It's great to use as a whole class approach. And I always like to link in with OT as well to see if there's anything from a sensory point of view that we can add in to support transitioning between those different emotions that a child might be feeling. And, you know, emotion work is really abstract. It's one of those higher level language things. So having the Makaton sign can just help to make that a little bit more concrete for the child. So it's really important to try and create a signing community within schools. You know, if a child's been learning Makaton at the preschool level and then they go to school and then nobody knows how to sign, then obviously we've got a problem there, because, you know, child's going to be signing and they're not going to be understood and they're not going to be signed back to. So it's really, really important to make sure that we're training up those around the child. In my previous role in early intervention, I wrote loads of EHCPs, and often the first EHCP for that child. And I'd always put on there as a provision that the class teacher and, you know, a few others really would be trained in Makaton level 1 and 2 in order to make sure that that child is supported with Makaton when they're in school, really. So if you are a speech and language therapist writing the EHCPs, I think it's a great one to add on to reports to make sure that children get that. Also in primary schools, just thinking about using signing in lots of different places. So they're not just signing with me in therapy sessions, but also signing in the dining room, on the bus, in the playground. Schools would often do things like we put in like sign of the week to try and get the whole school signing. Again, if you sign up to makaton.org and go on the mailing list, I'll send you a sign of the week. You can show your signing assembly, or if you've got like a parent newsletter, it's a great way to kind of get everybody thinking about Makaton. And then the final thing that can be really helpful for Makaton in schools is having somebody who's a signing lead. So I would often have, you know, one person who I'd make sure that they'd done levels 1, 2, 3, 4 Makaton training. And then because I'm not at the school all the time necessarily, it means that there's somebody who the rest of the team can go to within that school who's, you know, at a good level of training in Makaton, and they can liaise with me if they need anything else or if the school need training. So yeah, just something to think about as a way to kind of support with Makaton in school. So that's me. Next, we've got Annabel.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking about Makaton and especially my experience in working in specialist secondary schools and colleges. I think, Katie, you will have touched on some things that are definitely relevant throughout someone's education. But I'll speak a bit about my experience and just how Makaton has helped working in these types of education facilities. So I thought I would think about some big questions as well. And these are some questions that I have come across whilst working in education and whilst encouraging the use of signing as part of the culture of an education facility. So the first one is, why are we advocating use of sign when a person is verbal? And the second one is, why am I using signs with someone who is unlikely to sign back? So hopefully, as I go through my slides, we will get some answers to these questions. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was Makaton as part of a total communication toolbox. So working in special education schools and colleges means that you will come across people with lots and lots of a range of communication needs and abilities. So many education facilities, which you'll be aware of if you do work in one of these sectors, will adopt something called a total communication approach. And really what this does is demonstrate that school or that college has a positive culture towards valuing all means of communication as valid means of communication. So a total communication approach means thinking holistically about a person's abilities to communicate, and recognizing that different ways of communication might be more efficient for somebody than verbal language, or might be their preferred method of communication, and just valuing that as important as verbal language to that person. So a child or a young person might have some spoken language, but they might not always have the vocabulary to express themselves in every situation and every opportunity. And this is where Makaton sort of feeds in. So just on the right hand side, we've got a model called the Means, Reasons and Opportunities model, which you may have come across before. So when we think about means of communication, that's how somebody communicates, the different ways that they can communicate. When we think about the reasons, that's why they can communicate. Can they comment? Can they ask questions? Can they get help for themselves? All of these are different reasons for communication. And we also talk about opportunities. So where can they communicate? When can they communicate? Who can they communicate with? And Makaton, as part of our toolbox, would feed into the means of communication. So it's another additional means of communication for use with when speech might not be the most efficient way for that person to communicate. And thinking of my last role, this reminded me of a young woman that I worked with who had a degenerative condition, and she would come to us in the morning with fairly intelligible speech and able to express herself quite well. But because of her condition, she would rapidly fatigue throughout the day. So towards the end of the day, she had a lot more unintelligible speech, and she struggled to get her needs met. So even though verbal language was her main method of communication, we were able to teach her some Makaton signs for the afternoon, so that she could continue to have her needs met as the day went on. So thinking back to one of our big questions, why are we encouraging use of sign when a person's verbal? It's just another thing to put into our toolbox, just to ensure that they have the tools to communicate successfully as much as possible, to have as many opportunities to communicate as possible. And thinking about working in education, I wanted to just talk about creating an inclusive learning environment. So Makaton, as you will know, is not just a sign vocabulary, but it also has symbols that represent the words as well. And if you are familiar with working in schools and colleges and special education, supporting understanding and expressive language is imperative to creating a learning environment that's supportive to each individual's needs. So Makaton is really great in that it can provide additional support for both understanding written and verbal information, as well as supporting learners to express themselves as part of their education. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Makaton symbol system. So you may have come across a lot of symbol packages within your careers, or if you work with someone with special educational needs. There's lots and lots of symbols out there that people use. For example, the main ones are PCS symbols that you might know as board maker symbols, widget symbols, symbol sticks. These are all different symbol systems that we have. Makaton, however, I think some of the beauty of the Makaton symbols are in their simplicity. So if you haven't seen them, Sally very nicely drew some on one of the first slides. They are line drawings that have been designed to be as simple as possible. So they are meant to be easily recreated with just a pen and paper. So it makes them more accessible in those times when you might not be able to get to a computer to print something off. And again, this reminded me of a young lady that I used to work with who was supported with a Now and Next in order to access her education. So she'd have a work activity and then a reward activity. And imagine one day we come in and her favourite reward symbol is missing. So she used to love going out and having a bit of a bike ride in between doing learning activities. And these things happen. learning environments are busy, lots of things will get lost sort of throughout the day. But in this instance, we were really just quickly able to draw a new symbol for her, which looked just like the Makaton symbol she was used to, and she was able to carry on with her day. In special education as well, we frequently come across children and young people who have varying literacy abilities, and there's a lot of emphasis put on differentiating their work so that they're able to engage effectively and engage in their learning. So again, using symbols is another way that we can be supporting these people to understand written texts whilst they're learning. And then Makaton signs themselves. Makaton can naturally support us to slow down our speech as we aim to speak and sign all together, because there's a bit more processing going into it, having to remember the sign and having to speak at the same time. This does have a positive benefit to it, because it can make verbal delivery of information more accessible, as it supports us to slow it down so that it can support processing of the information that's being given. And again, it gives you that extra clue about what's being communicated. So just a summary on the slides, Makaton symbols are easily reproducible with limited resources. They follow consistent design features, which you will learn about on the Makaton courses. So there'll be different themes, and different sort of language families will have different components in the signs that follow consistent features. They can be used alongside written words and provide additional support. And this has positive implications for differentiating work, supporting literacy development, and also creating signage around schools and colleges to make the environment more accessible. Makaton signs, they're always used alongside speech, and where possible, they're guessable. Sally again touched upon this at the beginning. When I say guessable, that means they're iconic. They try to look as much like the thing that they're representing as possible. And Makaton signs have positive implications in supporting understanding in lessons and controlling the pace of verbal delivery. So if we go back to our other big question, why am I using signs with someone who's unlikely to sign back? It's important to remember that Makaton doesn't just equip someone with the additional means to communicate with us, but it also supports that understanding for them. And the last thing I wanted to touch upon was safeguarding. So again, if you've worked in an education facility, you'll know that all schools and colleges should have a really strong focus on safeguarding. And part of this is, it's not only about reporting concerns, but also supporting self-advocacy and self-reporting skills in the young people that we support. And as speech and language therapists, part of our role is to ensure that the people we support are able to express themselves more successfully. We have a really, really good role where we are able to support people to develop their language, and this can feed into safeguarding as well. So Makaton does have a safeguarding workshop, and it covers signs that, if taught to young people, might equip them with the language they need to discuss sensitive situations or raise concerns. It's really important that these signs are taught proactively, so you build them into things like PSHE or just the general culture of the school. So it's proactive rather than reactive. It's teaching the language before something occurs where they might need that language. So the things that the safeguarding workshop cover are people, family relationships, people around us, body parts and clothes, places, feelings, thoughts, behaviours, and sexual behaviour. So to summarise, Makaton can be used to support self-advocacy skills if a person does not have other ways to express complex issues. Katie touched on emotional literacy and how abstract that language can be. So having another means in the toolbox again to express these more complex issues has really, really important implications in safeguarding. And so thank you very much. I will hand over to Sally for our last part of the presentation.
That would help. Hi, everyone. So we've heard about babies, toddlers, and throughout the education journey. My focus is moving on beyond education with a particular focus on translation and music. So school and college has ended and life as we know it has changed and the predictability has gone. Statutory services often change and people are needing support. Often a number of people that have been involved throughout the young person's life up to this point has suddenly changed. And this can be really scary and a daunting time, not only for the young person, but for the family and the people that they are closest to as well. However, transitions can become a lot less scary when important support structures can be put in place early and appropriately for these same young people, having had that consistent support throughout their lives with everybody speaking the same language. So obviously not just speaking, but signing and support structures in place as they move into those adult services. But it's worth mentioning too that it's not just situations where people have grown up through the system that require the support. There are also situations where someone may start to require the need for additional support as well. This may be possibly due to starting to have difficulty with understanding or recall, whereas they haven't had these memory difficulties previously. I'm just going to quickly tell you a little story about my dad. Now, he was a fantastic man and he was always very proud of me and all my achievements, but he never really understood about me being a Makaton tutor and why I would use sign. If I'd ever signed to him, he would always say back to me, "What are you waving your arms about for me for? I'm not deaf and I don't need or understand any of that, dear." Now, about 6 weeks before my dad passed away, he got an infection and this affected him in many ways. It changed his levels of alertness, attention, memory, and his understanding of what he was doing. And when he went into hospital, he was refusing to eat and drink. And therefore, because of this, the antibiotics that they were trying to give him, they weren't activating. Now, when I arrived at the hospital, he lived down south and I was up in Lancaster. When I arrived at the hospital, I saw my mum and my sister both talking to him and they were trying to help him do things. And all I could see behind my dad's eyes was like sensory overload. And I decided that I thought I'm going to try some Makaton principles. I thought I'm going to break down my language and my instructions into small chunks, showing him what I was going to do. And I used signs to back up my language. And I said, we're going to walk over here. We're going to sit on the bed. And he did it. I asked him, is that better? Just using those key signs. Remember, my dad didn't need any signs. We didn't understand it or anything like that. I said, fancy a cup of tea? How about a biscuit? My dad loved a digestive. And then after that, I said, how about some soup? These key sentences. And then I gave him, found out from the nurses what he'd go, oh yeah, fancy a bit of soup. Found out what the soup choices were. And I then gave him some choices of what the soups were. The following day, I went back to see him and I had my old dad back. The antibiotics had kicked in. And the following day, he came home from hospital. To this day, I'm convinced that Makaton gave me an extra 6 weeks of memories with my lovely dad. So there you go. This is where using signs and symbols, I didn't use symbols, but I did use the signs, but using signs and symbols to back up our support of our speech can be helpful. Just those extra clues of what I was actually meaning when I was speaking helped with those concepts and the context as well. So concepts and contexts. The problem with our language and the way we use it and the manner in which we use the same words for many different contexts, how many different ways can we run something? We can run a race, yes, but we can leave a tap running. We can run a bath. We can run a red light. We can run for election. Have your tights run. Now let's think about some of these other words that are on here now. Tennis racket, you're making a racket. The seasons, let's season your food. Then you can have the pool. Yes, I'm actually talking about the swimming pool this time, not playing pool, Blackpool, Liverpool, or something that my dad used to do that I never understood, the football pools. So it's no surprise that we have so many words like this in everyday language that we need to be mindful when we're translating text into other things. So as we mentioned in the introductions, I'm the co-founder and director of Sign Out Loud, which is an amazing group of people from all over the UK who come together to sign Makaton and use natural gestures to songs. From pop and rock to opera and rap, you name it, we've probably signed it. We do look back now and regularly think, what were we thinking when we signed that? And we do still make mistakes, we're human. But translating things properly should and does take time. However, with songs and poetry and books and text, there is a balance to consider as well, because you want people to understand the meaning of something as well. But at the same time, you don't want to lose the beautiful poetry of the lyrics, because in songs and books and stories, there is beautiful poetry that the author or the songwriter has put in there on purpose. So sometimes at Sign Out Loud, we use our poetic license and decide that the literal translation is going to happen instead, because we like the beauty of the poetry. So there's going to be an example that I'm about to put up on here. In Katy Perry's Raw. So I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath. Now, I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath. She's not talking about anything about biting her tongue or breath holding. She's saying that in the past, she used to keep quiet. Scared to rock the boat and make a mess. She's not out at sea. In our opinion, she found it difficult to say how she felt. So this is what we chose to sign. In the past, I used to keep quiet and I used to find it difficult to say how I felt. But however, later in the later verse, we loved the visual imagery of the floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee, and I've earned my stripes, you know. But at the end, apart from the last line, when she went from nothing and grew up to be a winner and a champion, you know, so we went back to that as well there. So that's where the artistic free came in as well. So there are many things that are available that we see all every day that are translated into sign or symbol format. We may decide that we've been quickly asked to run off something for someone because they need something symbolized urgently. Now, the best advice I can give is to take the words away and think to yourself, if I take these words away, do these signs and symbols make sense? So here's some little tricks. So count on me. Now, you're not thinking about counting with your fingers. You're asking someone to rely on me, to trust me, something like that. If you're feeling blue, you're not the color, you're feeling sad. Stick together. You're not sticking like a stamp. Just be together. Okay. Your dreams coming true. You're not coming anywhere. They're just be, you don't need the word come at all. They're, just dreams. Reach your goal. There's no football goals. You're just thinking about the future or a target or changing. Future holds. You don't need to sign the hold, just the future. In time. You're not putting anything in anywhere. Silly sausage. Now, this was in a story. So you don't sign sausage. It's just, you're just being silly. Time flies by. There's no flapping wings. Time's going quickly. Hit the road. No punching in the road. You just need to go. Sings along. Don't fly anywhere. You're not following each other. Sing along together or with another person. And one of my favorites. Feeling like a someone. You're not actually feeling a person, you're feeling important. Okay, so just some of the recommendations online. So here's just a selection of some of the key groups of people that I recommend to look at for trained tutors who've really thought about their translations when translating music. There are lots of others, but these are specific ones that are available. Either these are YouTube links or Facebook links that are there. So you may find that some songs are repeated by different people and they've been translated by some in different ways, but there are justifications behind all the different translations. They're just different interpretations. However, you are learning from people who have all been trained for many years as Makaton tutors and who've put a lot of thought behind their translations. Please also remember to take advantage of the offers on the Makaton website, where you can sign up as a member for free and still have access to a number of free resources, including games linking to different topics, events, and special days throughout the years. Some songs, stories, games, and activities. So ways to embed simple routine, embed use every day. Simple daily routine activities such as brushing teeth, meal reminders, or to take medication. You can do baking or cooking instructions, how to break down a meal into simple step-by-step guides. You can use symbols around the house, or how to support what's in the cupboards and drawers. You can do this in your work or school settings and do this as an opportunity to practice your sign and symbol recall when you see them. Extend this further by finding a way to embed this into a sentence or a question and include this in with the next person that you talk to. Think about brushing your teeth, making a cup of tea. Look out again on the Makaton charity members events page. Bring specific Makaton, there are specific Makaton webinars relating to different topics, some of which are for members only, but there are some which are completely free and just need signing up to. Just look at makaton.org for more details, or you can contact any of us and we'll be happy to help wherever we can. So over to Annabel for some top tips.
Thanks, Sally. I am just going to leave you with some top tips before we finish. So first of all, using Makaton is fun. Make sure that you're making it as fun as possible, that it's a good communication interaction that you're having. Give that good eye contact, give that time to the conversation, and yeah, just make it as fun as possible. Try and use signs and symbols as much and as often as you can. Thinking of typical language development, the amount of language that we hear and we're exposed to is how we develop language. So the more we can do, the better. Remember to always speak as you sign to promote speech development. Think about your what you're saying, use clear, short sentences, and use signs and symbols for the most important words in that sentence. Use lots of encouragement, always praise any attempts of communication to ensure that someone remains feeling comfortable to communicate with you now and in the future. And the last tip that I will give you is don't give up. It can take a while to pick up signs, it can take a while to pick up language, but it's worth it in the end. So just keep going.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Annabel and Sally, for that. It's really interesting to hear about your own Makaton journeys and how you use Makaton yourself. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope there's some food for thought there and perhaps some ideas of ways that you could use Makaton in your own practice as a professional or as a parent with your child. So we'll just open up the chat for any questions. I can't see any at the moment. Please feel free to pop any comments below. Or if you've got any ideas about anything that you'd like to see in future webinars, then please feel free to drop some comments into the chat. We've got a range of other webinars and events coming up, and there's lots of free resources on our YouTube channel and on our Instagram accounts at ATtherapy. We also offer lots of external training courses. So we have Makaton coming up with Annabel soon, actually. So we've got a level 2 workshop coming up, which you can see there. You can follow the barcodes, or you can email info@ATtherapy for more information. We've also got lots of other trainings coming up got Tina Rossi, previously of Toby Dynavox, looking at literacy, and apologies. Sorry about that. Sorry, our next webinar, our next lunchtime webinar, sorry, is actually Caitlin, one of our speech and language therapists. It's called Access, Unlocking the Means to Communicate. And she'll be talking about electronic AAC and who uses it. She's going to be discussing access, 6 different access methods and why it's important, and kind of how to use those with different client groups. So we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to finish recording now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.